On this episode, in search of the historical King David and King Solomon leads to some stunning findings.
When we go to our roots, we find the whole thing clear. We find that we are all brothers, we are all together. We have the same family, we are the same people.
Hey, welcome to your Wednesday. Author Ahmed Osman is standing by on the line from England to discuss the origins of King David and King Solomon and the roots of ancient Israel. And I think you're going to find this a fascinating discussion. You know, Israel is a place I've always wanted to visit. It's high on my list. I'd like nothing more than to take the family and retrace Jesus' steps through the Holy Land and to be able to bring all of those wonderful Bible stories to life. And what's amazing is that so many stories and characters in the Bible are once thought by skeptics to be pieces of fiction were later proven to be historically accurate after some archaeological discovery. It happens time and time again. One character from the Bible, however, whose origin remains a mystery, is King David. Skeptics continue to insist he was not a real person. But Ahmed Osman believes he's found proof that he was real, and turns out we were just looking in the wrong time and the wrong place. Ahmed has discovered an intriguing back door into biblical history and asks a compelling question. Did the authors of the Old Testament attribute the military victories of an Egyptian pharaoh to David, the famous slayer of Goliath? Ahmed Osman has been trying to discover the historical origin of the stories of the Bible for the last 30 years. He's the author of several books, including Christianity, an Ancient Egyptian Religion, Moses and Akhenaten, and The Lost City of Exodus. His latest is The Egyptian Origins of King David and the Temple of Solomon. Ahmed Osman, welcome to Conspiracy Unlimited. How are you?
I'm all right. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. First of all, let's talk about King David. For those not familiar with this poet, shepherd, king in the Old Testament, just tell us a little bit about who he was supposed to be.
He was an ordinary young shepherd who liked music and so on. And the king invited him to help him to play music and so on. And then eventually there was a conflict between Palestinian or Philistine laws and the Israelites. And a giant came to challenge the Israelites. Nobody was able to face him. Then this young man, David, challenged him and was able to beat him. And in a day, he became a hero. So much so that even the king was jealous of his popularity among the Israelites at the time. So eventually, although he came from an ordinary background, we know that he became a mighty warrior who established a great empire extending from the river Euphrates in northern Syria to the borders of Egypt, a big, large empire. And when he died, this empire was inherited by Solomon, who the king of peace, who didn't have to fight for the empire, and his time was the best time. He had a lot of wives and women and treasure and so on.
Right, and of course, King David is also attributed to uniting the two kingdoms, Judah and the northern kingdom of Israel, into one united kingdom. But the interesting thing, as you point out, about King David is there is this duality to him, almost the same as the comparing the God of the Old and the New Testament. You have the wrathful, seemingly vengeful God of the Old Testament, and then you have this loving, merciful God of the New Testament. With David, you have this poet, musician, who is very much in tune with God, who spoke with God. And then you have this jealous, somewhat conniving David. It's kind of an interesting paradox.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the story was written about 6th century BC by the priests in Babylon, in Iraq, you see. We don't have a contemporary information at the time. They related him, they placed him at the time of the 10th century BC. And they were, they had a conflict between the information they got from oral traditions and from whatever written documents they had at the time. So they composed a very complicated character. Really, it's not realistic. A young boy who would defeat a giant, a musician who became an emperor, and so it is not it's a realistic historical kind of a character. It was established later on, obviously relying on some historical transmission of news, but this is the way they made up the character.
Well, there are skeptics who say there's no archaeological evidence for a King David or a King Solomon or a Solomon's temple, for that matter. But you have another solution, I suppose, that there was a King David, but, well, I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah, the thing is, you see, as you said, modern archaeologists went to dig at the time of the 10th century BC for the empire established by David. The Bible, Samuel and Kings mention specific locations, cities he destroyed and captured, and built some royal palace, and so he had established some points that archaeologists were trying to dig and try to find evidence of it. He established, built a house in Jerusalem, and he destroyed some cities, establishing this empire. So when they went to dig at the level strata of the 10th century BC, in the very same location mentioned by the Bible, they found no evidence whatsoever, no evidence of destruction, no evidence of a palace built or anything else. However, they found exactly all the evidence to confirm the biblical account only 5 centuries earlier, during the 15th century BC. So this is the first. I did not follow up the chronology of the Bible. I rather took the story and tried to find it. Where did it happen? When did these things took place? You see. So I found exactly the same story of the Bible of David. I found it in history, but only 15 centuries earlier, 15th century BC. For instance, the Bible says that David went to regain the empire he lost. And we know that he was a shepherd and he had no empire that he lost. But there is another king, really, who lived on the 15th century BC, who lost the empire and went out to establish it. And it was this empire, exactly mentioned in the Bible, that he achieved. But he was not come from Judea. He came from Egypt. His name is Thutmose III. The only empire established in the Middle East, the first ever empire between the River Nile and the Euphrates, was established by Thutmose III, Pharaoh of Egypt.
So, in other words, Ahmed, what you're saying is there was a basis for a King David, but in the Bible, it's the chronology is all jumbled up, and in fact, that King David, is really a composite character, drawn not only from this Pharaoh from, I believe, the 18th dynasty, but also from another character, correct?
Correct. And the reason they tried to hide the original, Thutmose III, the first part of his name is Thutmose. This in hieroglyphic is represented by the ibis bird, which represents Tut. In Egyptian, the T, Egyptian T becomes a D in Hebrew. So his first name is Dud in Hebrew. And Dud is a biblical Hebrew name for David. So the name is correct. But the thing is, because the nature, for some reason, they wanted to hide. Eventually, if we look at the time of Thutmose III, whom I think was a historical David, we find another story in the Bible saying that Abraham, the Hebrew, came from Canaan with his wife Sarah, because there was a kind of a famine in Canaan, and he came to Egypt. When they came to the borders entering Egypt, Abraham he was Abram at the time. His name was Abram, and Sarai. This name changed later. He told his wife, "Don't say that you are my wife, because they might like you and want to take you from me. They might kill me because of you, to take you from me. Say you are my sister." So when eventually they came to the Egyptian city, Pharaoh's people saw her beauty, and they told the Pharaoh, and he wanted to see her. So he invited Abraham and Sarah, his wife, to his palace, his royal palace, and he asked Abraham if he can marry his sister Sarah. And he married her, according to the Bible. She was married to Abraham, but this story could not be a fiction, because it is not, morally speaking, it is not something good to talk about it. So the fact that it found in the Bible that Abraham gave his wife to be married to another man, to Pharaoh, this confirms that it is a real historical event. So Pharaoh married Sarah, Abraham's wife, but eventually he must have found out that she was married to Abraham. So he called Abraham and told him, "Why did you tell me she was your sister? So I married her. Take Sarah, and take all the things I gave you, and leave Egypt. Go back to Canaan, to your land." At the same time, he sent with Sarah another lady called Hagar, whom Abraham married after that. So this marriage, the Bible doesn't name the Pharaoh who married Sarah, but the time of Abraham, at the time of Abraham, it was Thutmose III who was the Pharaoh of Egypt. So after this, when Sarah went back to Canaan, she gave birth to Isaac. Now she was married to two men, and now Isaac, whose son was Isaac. If we look at the events that took place after the birth of Isaac, we find very strange things. First of all, Abraham wanted to slaughter the baby, offering him on the altar in Jerusalem. Why should he slaughter his son?
Well, presumably because according to the Bible tells us that God was testing his faith, and he asked Abraham to.
I don't think because testing his faith, but it was the Lord. He told him, "Don't slaughter him, don't sacrifice him." And not only that, before Isaac was born, when Sarah was pregnant, the Lord spoke to Abraham and gave him some instructions. "You and all the people, the men in your house, should be circumcised. Now, up to that time, only Egyptians male were circumcised. So this was a kind of a covenant between the Lord and Abraham to become a kind of Egyptians, you see.
Interesting.
And then again, he told him that your descendants, will inherit the land between the river Euphrates and the borders of Egypt. And this was exactly the empire established by Pharaoh of the time.
Thutmose III.
Thutmose III.
So now, let me just, because you're throwing a lot of amazing information here, Ahmed. I just want to recap and make sure I'm following along. So,
okay.
King David was actually Pharaoh Thutmose III, and King David actually lived about 500 years.
15 years before the biblical
yes,
time for David.
500 years. And so, because the chronology is all jumbled up, instead of King David actually being a descendant from the line of the tribe of Judah, he would actually then be the father of Isaac, and he would therefore be the father of the tribe of all of the tribes of Israel.
Exactly. He is the father of Israel. Isaac is the father of Jacob, who became known as Israel.
Yes.
So in reality, Israel was the son of Egyptian Pharaoh. So he was the father of Isaac rather than being one of his descendants, you see, and the father of the Israelites.
Right.
And that's the whole thing that maybe later on biblical narrators wanted to hide, this fact, that their great-grandfather was really an Egyptian pharaoh.
So, right, that the tribes of Israel actually have their roots in Egypt.
Their mother was Sarah, the Hebrew, and their father was and they, again, you see, the promise of the empire, inheriting the empire, was not. Abraham had Ishmael from Hagar,
right,
the Egyptian, and had another 6 sons from a woman he married called Keturah from northern Hijaz in Arabia. You see, he has 7 other sons that Isaac. Nevertheless, the promise of inheritance of the land between the Euphrates and Egypt is only for Isaac and his descendants, because he was of course, the heir of the Pharaoh. That is, there are many indications in the Bible. Even the Talmud have a story to say that when Abraham was celebrating the birth of his son, the people of the town laughed and said, he doesn't even look like him. They doubted that he was his son, you see. And so I think the great grandfather of the Israel is the son of Egypt. This is the whole thing, of the Egyptian Pharaoh. Another story in the Talmud says that when Sarah learned that Abraham took Isaac, her son, to be slaughtered in Jerusalem, she died. She died because of that when he heard this news. So all indications is the fact that Isaac was the son of Thutmose III, who established the empire between the river. And this is confirmed. Only there we can find evidence of the empire that the Bible talks about for David, between the Euphrates and the borders of Egypt.
Right, because and you mentioned the river Euphrates as being the sort of the easternmost part of the empire, and as further evidence of your theory, nowhere in the Bible does it talk about King David's empire extending that far east, correct?
It is extending from the Euphrates, northern Syria, to the borders of Egypt. It doesn't go to Persia or Iraq or No, it's only the exact empire is established by Thutmose III.
Okay, but you also, I believe, in your book,
Yes,
The Egyptian Origins of King David and the Temple of Solomon, suggest that King David of the Old Testament is really a composite not only of Thutmose III, but one other individual.
not really. The thing is, he was a young boy. He was born to his father was Thutmose II. He was not the heir, the real heir. His stepmother was Hatshepsut, Queen Hatshepsut. And when before his father died, he wanted to make sure that his son, Thutmose III, who was not the son of Hatshepsut, the queen, was the son of an ordinary woman. He wanted to make sure that he will follow him on the throne. But in the Egyptian situation, the throne is inherited through the female line, not the male line. So whoever marries the eldest daughter of Pharaoh will have the right to sit on the throne. But Hatshepsut refused to let Thutmose III marry her daughter, so he had no right to follow the throne. So what his father did, Thutmose II, he took him to the temple of Amun, and there the priests carried the image of Amun, the Lord Amun, and they turned around in the temple, and they came to the boy. He was young at the time, about 5 years old, and they took him and put him on the throne. So he was in a way adopted because in Egyptian tradition, Amun, the god Amun, owns the two lands of Egypt, and nobody could sit on the throne of Egypt unless he was the son of Amun, the son of God. And because Amenhotep III, his mother was not the heiress, so he was not the legitimate son of Amun. So in this case, he had to be adopted by Amun as to being his son. And we have a story even written in the Karnak temple in the walls that he was ushered to the heaven. He went to heaven to the throne of Amun, who himself told him, "You are my son," in adoption situation, and gave him this snake on his head to crown as a king. But because he was young, when his father died, Queen Hatshepsut, his stepmother, did not allow him any power at all. She put him aside, and only after her death, he started to move to, Canaan first, then Syria, and to establish, because his grandfather, Thutmose I, did establish a great empire from the Euphrates to the Nile. However, he did not put garrisons in these different places. He did not confirm the rule all over the place. And when, with time, the local rulers kicked out the Egyptians, so he wanted to re-establish his great father empire, and he this time, for the first war he had is in Har Magedon, in a position in northern Israel now called Har Magedon, which is the Mount of Magedon, you see. And in this war, he fought about 300 kings of the whole Syria, and who gathered to fight him at the thing, and he won. This is why this Armageddon, is promised at the end of days when Jesus is supposed to come back. This is the final position war that he has to fight against evil, you see.
Right.
So he's the son of David, from the line of David, Jesus. This is the whole thing. Confirming. All modern archaeologists even the Israelis, archaeologists, because they didn't find any evidence at the time of 10th century BC to confirm the story, biblical story about David. They said this is fantasy, it's not true. They completely dismissed it as to be a fiction, not a history.
Right.
But
They just weren't looking. They weren't looking for King David in the right time or the right place. Hi, friends. If you're a fan of this podcast, or my weekly radio program, The Conspiracy Show, or my YouTube channel, Strange Planet, I hope you'll consider becoming an official donor. A donation of $50 a month places you in the Star Chamber. $20 a month is the Whistleblower tier, and a donation of just $10 per month makes you a truth seeker. Star Chamber and Whistleblower members can participate in an exclusive monthly online chat or video conference with me, and all donors are entered into a monthly draw for Strange Planet merchandise. Any monthly amount is welcome and greatly appreciated. Since YouTube demonetized my channel, I need your support more than ever. To become an official donor, go to patreon.com/Strange Planet. Patreon.com/Strange Planet.
In another reality, Richard is a very strong and handsome man. Just not in our reality. Although I heard somebody passing him in the hall the other day, and it was, what a handsome man Richard is. I made that up. Conspiracy Unlimited with Richard Serrett.
Ahmed Osman, the author of The Egyptian Origins of King David and the Temple of Solomon, is here. Let me see if there's some other parallels that sort of confirm the theory. So, for example, King David was said to have ruled Judea and Israel for about 40 years. So, and he died on the throne when he was 70. Does this parallel Thutmose III's reign of the empire?
Yeah, Thutmose's reign was about 50 years, really. He reigned for 50 years, not for 40 years. Yeah, but even the story of Pharaoh and the Sarah, we have another in the story of a biblical story. We have a similar story that David went to Jerusalem when his army was, waiting surrounding a city, and he went on top of his house and looked over, and he saw a woman, bathing woman next to him, and he liked her, and he invited her, and he made love to her.
Bathsheba.
Yes, yeah. And he married her, and he wanted her, and he called her, husband from the border, from the battle, and eventually he sent him to be killed.
Right. Bathsheba was married, and her husband was a Hittite, Uriah.
Was Uriah, and Uriah. If you look at Uriah, Uriah means the man of Ur, and the man of Ur is Abraham. Abraham came from Ur. Even the name of her husband represents Abraham. Uriah. Ur is the city. Uriah, the man from Ur. You see.
Ah.
So he married a woman. He was already married to another man. This is the same situation, according to the Bible, that David had the very same situation.
So you're saying Bathsheba was Sarah. Bathsheba was Sarah.
Was in fact, in historical terms, Sheba was Sarah. Yes, she's a married woman who married. She married Uriah and David at the same time.
And Uriah was Abraham, the man from Ur.
The Bible says that Abraham came from Ur, was born in Ur.
Right.
Uriah is the man of Ur.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about the parallels with of course, David battled the Philistines and recaptured the Ark of the Covenant, which had been taken from the Israelites during a battle when King Saul was still the king of Israel. And of course, King David supposedly recaptured the Ark of the Covenant. Is there anything in Pharaoh Thutmose III story that parallels that story?
Yeah, if you go back to the Bible and read the story that David took the Ark to Jerusalem, does not say that this was the Ark of the Covenant. Ark of the Covenant is the Ark of Moses. They say the Ark of the Lord. The Ark of the Lord. And here we find the similar situation. When Thutmose III went to battle in Canaan, he took with him the Ark of his god Ammon, you see. And when he surrounded the city his army was around the city, he went with his own men, to Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the only city. It was not called Jerusalem at the time. It's called Kadesh. He went there, and because of the high land and the rock over there was a holy rock for the local people, he put the ark of his Lord, of his god Ammon, on the very same place, because this was a holy place in this Kadesh, which became known as Urushalayim after that, or Jerusalem. And because the king has to use it every morning, that he can, perform rituals in front of the god. You see, he took some of his guards, and he went to Jerusalem for 6 months. He stayed there until the city was about to fall, and he went. So he took the Ark of the Lord, of the God. In the Bible, okay, they talk about the Ark. It is assumed that he was talking about the same Ark, but it says the Ark of the Lord, the Ark of God, not the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of Covenant is a different thing altogether.
Aha.
Yeah, yes, Thutmose III went to Jerusalem and took the Ark of Ammon, and he was the first one to put his Ark on the top of the rock, the holy rock of Jerusalem.
We haven't touched on King David's son, King Solomon. So King Solomon then, if it following your theory, would have been one of the sons of Pharaoh Thutmose III, correct?
Yeah, he was not his son, he was his great grandson. And Amenhotep III. We have Amenhotep III, who inherited this great empire. His time was the time of peace. If you look at the original name of Solomon, his name was not Solomon, it was Judaidah. He became known as Solomon because he was the king of peace. Amenhotep III was also the king of peace. That's why during his time, Jerusalem came to be, was called Kadesh, and during the time from the Amarna tablets, we have a historical text writing, the city of Kadesh became known as Jerusalem at the time of Amenhotep III. This king all what is written about Solomon in the Bible, we find in the time of Amenhotep III. He ruled the whole empire, the empire established by David. He had a lot of harem, he married many foreign princesses, including the daughter of Pharaoh. And he worshipped. You have something very strange in the Bible about Solomon, because although he built the temple of God, you see, they say that because of his foreign wives, he also worshipped other gods. How can the king who established the temple of God worship other gods? Here we find Amenhotep III, who worshipped the gods of Egypt. His son Akhenaten introduces the monotheistic religion of the one god Aten. And we find Amenhotep III, although worshipping the Egyptian gods, also worshipping the one god Aten. Yeah, exactly the same as in the case of Solomon. He had lot of gold, and he built many temples. He established, Amenhotep III was the first one really to build a small temple in Jerusalem on the rock, because he had a military garrison in Jerusalem. And for this Egyptian military garrison, he built a small temple around the rock. The rock became the Holy of Holies of the first temple. But his main temple that is mentioned in the Bible, was described in the Bible with the two pillars, is really not in Jerusalem. It's found in Egypt.
Now, I neglected to ask you one more thing about King David, and that is, was Pharaoh Thutmose III a musician? Was he a poet? Did he write the Psalms?
No, we don't know anything about that of him. But there is another point I have to tell you about it. King David in the Bible is the only king who is said to be the Son of God. The Son of God is nothing to do with the Old Testament. They don't know anything about the Son of God. God has no son. But King David is described as being, God tells him, "You are my son," exactly as the Egyptian Pharaoh. King David was the son of God.
Fascinating.
It's the Bible, which is very strange, because the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, does not regard that God has a son.
Right. Although Christians believe that the New Testament is concealed in the Old Testament.
Yes, one of the. So I believe that all the Bible stories, all the biblical stories, have the original historical origin. The only thing, the Bible confuses the chronology of the events, and the whole story is found during the time of the 18th century, the 18th dynasty of Egyptian rule, from the 15th century BC to the end of the 14th century BC.
Right.
We have the whole account of the Bible confirmed by history. It was history, only the chronology was confused. So when the archaeologists looked at a different time, at a different location, they found nothing. But when they looked at the same time, you find everything written in the Bible, you find it in archaeology during the time of Moses III.
So aside from reordering the chronology and the ancestors now become Egyptian, the forefathers of the tribes of Israel are Egyptian, does this do anything to challenge the divinity of Jesus? Does it do anything to challenge the establishment of Israel in your mind?
On the contrary, it does. It confirms. It does not challenge it. It confirms the divinity, the origin of Israel, and confirms the divinity of Jesus. Divinity is a kind of a spiritual kind of thing. It's a relation between man and God. And it was in Egypt, really. If you want to look at the divinity, we have to go to Egypt, not to Palestine. Because, you see, it was in Egypt that during the time of the pyramid builders, that Egyptians recognized that humans have two dimensions. One spiritual, the Ka and Ba, and one physical. And the physical one can disappear, but if they keep it through mummification and burial with Book of the Dead spells, the spirit they believed can come back. and resurrection takes place. This is the first. I didn't see no other nation, even the Israelites, even Moses himself never spoke about the Spirit. Later on, I mean, at the time of Moses, Akhenaten, in my view, I mean, he was able to recognize that not only humans have two dimensions, one is spiritual and one physical, but the universe, the cosmos itself, the physical cosmos has a spiritual dimension. He called Aten. Aten, it means the light, the beams of light. He recognized the divinity that Aten in light. Energy is energy. Even nowadays, they identify the power as energy, you see. Later on, during the first part of the Christian era, we have the third and final movement that you see, because when the Romans closed all the temples of Egypt, except the Alexandrian temple, the Egyptians went in the street looking for salvation. And then to find salvation, they did not find it. They were called the Gnostics, you see, the people who looked for knowledge, but not physical, knowledge, not scientific knowledge, but spiritual knowledge. So they eventually realized that you don't really have to be mummified to be able to live the second life. They realize that within you, within human being, there is the spirit, and the spirit of man is in fact part of the universal spirit. So, Jesus say, "Believe in me, and you will never die," because if you believe that Jesus, this is not historical. Nobody saw Jesus resurrected except of Mary Magdalene when she said that. But you see, if you can believe, if you can, anybody can. It's a belief. It's not science. It's not knowledge through physical, senses. But if you were to believe, then there and then, if you believe that the dead person has risen, you have your third eye has opened, and you can see that you can see the spirit within you, and that this spirit is part of the universal power, universal light. So there is no death. Death is the physical body dies, but the spirit, the light goes back to the universal God. Salvation, Christian salvation, is so much confirmed, not denied by this. Again, the Israelis and Israelite history, they become. If you look at the history of the modern Israel, for instance, you find a kind of love-hate relationship with Egypt. You see, because, as I said in my beginning of my book, is that Israel is the son of Egypt, the illegitimate son of Egypt, who challenged his father to accept him.
Ah, interesting, interesting. You know, what stands out to me is, if this is true, to me, if Egypt sort of is the birthplace then of Christianity and the tribes of Israel, it really ought to pull Israel, Christians, and Egypt closer together.
The whole thing together. We have to destroy the barriers. These barriers are not natural. When we go to our roots, we find the whole thing clear. We find that we are all brothers. We are all together. We have the same family. We are the same people. Yes, as you say.
Fascinating. Well, Ahmed Osman, thank you so much. And how can people get a hold of this book, The Egyptian Origins of King David and the Temple of Solomon?
It is in Amazon and in all the major bookshops in America. And obviously it's published by Inner Traditions in America.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ahmed. Great to meet you.
Thank you.
Next time, a former Playboy model returns to the Playboy Mansion to investigate a possible haunting.
He was telling me about spots that I did not know about that they specifically blocked off in the basement and said that, oh, that doesn't go anywhere, when they actually did. A lot of people have a lot of stories, and especially the staff. I guess some of the staff were just too afraid to even go into certain rooms alone.
Until then, I'm Richard Serrett. So long for now.